D, wait for it, delightful.
Check out the name tag. You're in my world now, Grandma.
The Harry Potter series has sold billions of dollars worth of books, movie tickets, and DVDs because it's one of those rare series that children can enjoy but won't make adults want to gouge out their eyes. Author j.k. Rowling had a way of throwing a bone to the grown-ups here and there by slipping in sly little adult references along the way. It's usually done in subtext, like the elderly wizard Dumbledore's homosexual relationship with the male wizard Grindelwald. But sometimes it's right there in the open for anyone perceptive enough to get it, and sometimes it gets pretty nasty. Dolores Umbridge gets gang raped by centaurs. Dolores Umbridge is perhaps the one person in the whole Harry Potter universe who is virtually impossible to like, no matter what angle you choose to piss on her from. The short-lived headmistress of Hogwarts gets off on torturing children, has an unflinching holier-than-thou attitude, and unless David Yates has something stashed away in an extended edition of the films, she gets away with it. Unless you count the part where she is abducted and gang raped by centaurs in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. And if you think I'm just filling in the rape stuff with my filthy imagination, hang on. Near the climax of the book/film, Umbridge is hauled screaming into a forbidden forest by a group of centaurs. No one sees what happens next. What you have to realize is that there's a reason Rowling made sure it was centaurs who snatched Umbridge, rather than any of the countless other dangerous creatures in the forest, like the giant spiders. If you're familiar with mythology of centaurs, seeing a screaming woman get hauled away by a bunch of them gives you the same feeling you get in Deliverance when Ned Beatty falls into the hands of the hillbillies, or when Bruce Willis and Ving Rhames wind up imprisoned by the same in Pulp Fiction. Centaurs rape human women. That's what they do. That's a central part of their mythology. In one legend, centaurs were invited to a wedding feast and attempted to rape the bride. In another, the famous centaur Nicias was killed while trying to rape a woman. That's the point of centaurs as characters. They have the heads of men and the animal urges of horses. People on the internet familiar with the mythology were quick to notice this, as were feminist blogs. After all, showing Umbridge getting dragged away by centaurs would be like having Draco Malfoy getting his comeuppance by having him get hauled into the back of a windowless van by a creepy guy with a wispy mustache. We don't need to see what happens next if we know the context. Now, if that had been the last time we saw Umbridge in the series, then you could say, okay, maybe these centaurs are different. Maybe they just trampled her to death, or stamped her, or tied her to a tree and strapped a bag full of oats to her face. But Umbridge comes back suffering from some kind of major trauma. That didn't involve any damage to the visible parts of her body. Here's Rowling's description of her in the aftermath. Professor Umbridge was lying in a bed opposite them, gazing up at the ceiling. Since she had returned to the castle, she had not, as far as any of them knew, uttered a single word. Nobody really knew what was wrong with her. Either her unusual neat mossy hair was very untidy, and there were still bits of twigs and leaves in it, but otherwise she seemed to be quite unscathed. Madame Pomfrey says she's just in shock, whispered Hermione. Sulking, more like, said Ginny. Yeah, she shows signs of life if you do this, said Ron, and with his tongue he made soft clip-clop noises. Umbridge sat bolt right up, looking around wildly. Anything wrong, Professor? Called Madame Pomfrey, poking her head around her office door. No, said Umbridge, sinking back into her pillows. No, I must have been dreaming. Hermione and Ginny muffled their laughter in the bedclothes. To make it even weirder, two characters watch Umbridge getting dragged away, Harry Potter and Hermione Granger. At least one of those two knows that centaurs are rape machines. Hint, it's Hermione, the character whose main purpose in the plot is to know absolutely everything. Neither of them make an effort to save Umbridge. Potter gets in a witty James Bond-esque quip as she's dragged away, and Hermione seems satisfied that mass horse rape is fitting punishment. We like to think that on the way back to school, Harry asked, "So, what do you suppose those centaurs are going to do to the professor?" And that Hermione casually described to him how Umbridge would almost certainly be brutally violated by equally endowed interspecies rapists. And that was the day Harry learned that you do not mess with Hermione Granger. Magical date rape drugs are legal and sold in the open. When you have repeated murders, werewolf sightings, and evidence of students being tortured being wholly ignored by the grown-ups in the wizarding community, it only makes sense that something as profound as a date rape crisis plaguing students at Hogwarts would be placed in the same I do not care file. And I mean, magical drugs that make it possible aren't even illegal. They're sold in the open at the magical joke shop run by Ron's brothers Fred and George Weasley. The love potions in the Weasley's Wonder Witch line alone include such adorable names as Beguiling Bubbles, Heartbreak Teardrops, Kissing Concoction, Twilight Moonbeams, and, no joke, Cupid Crystals. Seriously, crystals? And each one of the products can be disguised as perfumes and cough potions to hoodwink Hogwarts' already AWOL authorities. Oh, and do they work? According to the Weasley twins themselves, for up to 24 hours at a time, depending on the weight of the boy in question and the attractiveness of the girl. In case you think this is just a scam by the Jokers to hoodwink horny teenage wizards out of their money, we actually see a love potion in action later. At one point, a female wizard named Romilda Vane, according to Hermione looked like she meant business, gives Harry a box of chocolates spiked with love potion. Harry doesn't eat them, but his friend Ron does, at which point he becomes a slack-jawed, lust-obsessed zombie who has to be cured by a teacher just so he can function again. To make it even weirder, in case you think this is just another movie treating female-on-male sexual assault as a lighthearted fun, Rowling goes out of her way to portray the negative consequences. How far out of the way? The villain of the wizarding world, Lord Voldemort, was the result of a female wizard using magic to turn a rich guy into a mindless sex slave. It went on long enough for them to birth a child. According to Albus Dumbledore, Voldemort's mother, Merope Grant, grew up in a dump that was the wizarding equivalent of impoverished West Virginia. She finally found a man by using either an Imperious Curse, a mind control spell, or a love potion to make a wealthy man named Tom Riddle Sr. her lover, husband, and private slave stud for at least a year. The result of this year-long slave sex at the hands of this circus-like freak was Tom Marvolo Riddle, Lord Voldemort, who understandably was a bit of a dick from the get-go. Polyjuice Potion and Temporary Gender Reassignment. Polyjuice Potion, a nefarious cocktail that is requested more frequently throughout the Harry Potter series than water, is one of many brews from the wizarding world that is probably illegal everywhere outside of Amsterdam. More on that later. The juice enables anyone to take the physical form of any person. It's the perfect disguise, and it's not just their face. You assume their entire physical body, genitalia included. With that firmly in mind, let's examine some famous uses of the potion in the books. First, Dark Wizard Barty Crouch Jr. avoided jail by using the potion to take on the body of his own mother. Yeah, that's some Norman Bain shit right there. And then you have the scene in the Deathly Hallows when Harry's best friend Ron, Hermione, Ron's brothers, Fleur Delacour, and others all found out the hard way what it's like to have Harry Potter's junk in their trousers when they took the potion during the ploy to create a bunch of Potter decoys to foil an assassination attempt. To make it even weirder, imagine a universe where this stuff actually existed. To assume the physical form of someone else, all you need is one of their hairs. So imagine the black market in the wizarding world that exists for the hairs of, say, famous starlets, with dudes giving themselves several hours access to famous genitals. Now imagine what pedophiles would do with it. Oh, and did I mention that getting a mix of human and animal hair in the potion turns you into a living, breathing furry? Dumbledore's brother got busted for bestiality. Say hello to Aberforth Dumbledore, Albus's brother. And in the wizard world, he is probably a sex offender. This is another of J.K. Rowling's quick throwaway jokes that is meant to fly right over the heads of 9-year-olds, but is supposed to make the grown-ups giggle. You find the references in both Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire and Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, where it is mentioned in passing that Dumbledore's brother Aberforth got in trouble for a minor scandal with the Department of Magical Law Enforcement for using inappropriate charms on a goat. To make it even weirder, we know that there is not one part of inappropriate charms on a goat that does not warrant some serious explaining, which is why one of J.K. Rowling's readers asked her about this at the same Q&A where she disclosed Albus Dumbledore's homosexuality. Let's take a look at that. Questionnaire. In the Goblet of Fire, Dumbledore said his brother was prosecuted for participating in inappropriate charms on a goat. What were the inappropriate charms he was participating on that goat? J.K. Rowling. How old are you? Questionnaire. 8. J.K. Rowling. I think that he was trying to make a goat that was easy to keep clean curly horns. That's a joke that works on a couple of levels. I really like Aberforth and his goats, but Aberforth having this strange fondness for goats, if you've read book 7, came in really useful to Harry later on because a goat, a stag, if you're a stupid Death Eater, what's the difference? So that is my answer to you. Hagrid's father banged a giant. The groundskeeper at Hogwarts is Rubeus Hagrid, an abnormally huge, kind man who is universally beloved by the good guys. Hagrid is a half-giant, roughly 8.5 feet tall, which should immediately raise questions if you are old enough to know where babies come from. And sure enough, Hagrid described his father as a tiny little man, even by non-giant standards. Hagrid's mother, meanwhile, was the giantess Fridwulfa. While I'll be the first to point out that even if she was considered small by giant standards, she nevertheless possessed a womb ample enough to accommodate a 16-foot-tall son. And no, I'm not talking about Hagrid, but his full giant half-brother Grop, who was the product of good old-fashioned giant sex between Fridwulfa and a male giant, between the giant-sized Schwanstucker. So the big question is how this tiny little man was able to successfully impregnate a titanic woman whose sex organs were probably more commodious to most humans than a hotel room in Tokyo. To make it even weirder, while I personally wish this discomforting discussion about giant sex could end here, the truth is that Hagrid's father is not the only human to knock boots with someone taller than the telephone pole in Miss Rowling's Wizarding World. Olympe Maxine, headmistress of Beauxbaton's Academy of Magic and Hagrid's old flame, is a half-giant as well. In fact, there are apparently enough half-giants in the Harry Potter universe to warrant their own wiki entry. The precise number of wizards and witches rubbing wands with these huge humanoid monsters remains a mystery, as does how it works when it's a male giant and, say, a 5-foot-tall female. For that mental image, you can thank Miss Rowling. Hey nerds, if you like this video, go ahead and click that deep what icon and subscribe. If you want to see more videos like this, join me every Tuesday where you can check out the list.